Welcome to this video, and I'm going to do an astrology video here to give you an outline on the market. I got some really good information for you here, so this video is going to be, I think, very valuable to helping you understand the big picture in terms of what's going on with the market. As you know, I trade exclusively on my trading system, my mathematically based trading system, and I've kind of moved away from the astrology. Not that it's not important, it's just that for trades right now I'm focusing just on my system. But the astrology still it works very well. I think in the big picture, and I think it's important to help us understand what's going on with the market. So the first thing I want to talk about here is I have a bunch of graphs here, and this program is Market Trader Gold. It's in my opinion, the best astrology software out there. It's created by Air Software, and the creator's name is Alfie Lavoie. And this software allows you to do a lot of research. So it's not a software where if you order it, you can just plug it in and it tells you what to do. You kind of have to know what the planets mean. It's really meant for astrologers, basically, or people that understand astrology. With this program, I can do a lot of research, and I've talked a lot of times about the concept of Mercury retrograde in market crashes. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about that down here on the bottom. Down here I have when Mercury is going slow and when it makes a station. Okay, so when Mercury is moving, it moves and it slows down and then it stops. Okay, so the one thing to show here is that every time we've had I think some major market crashes, Mercury is typically slow. So if you look at these areas into here where we have a lot of declines, and I'm talking about the big ones, usually Mercury is slow and about to make a station. If we go back into even the 2008 period, you can see a lot of the largest declines happen right near that period or in that period where it's moving slow. And I've done a video on this before. I just think it's important to note, because if you need to start looking at the market for crash situations, you want to look for Mercury slowing down, and it's doing that right now. It's going to make a retrograde next week, and so now's the time we need to start watching if we want to look for a crash scenario. So this red period here, this is just when Mercury's going slow. You can see here the 1987 crash happened right when it went direct. So I look for also, when does it make a station? In other words, when is it changing direction? Well, that's usually when we got a crash. It's happening right there. And so a lot of people shy away from astrology, and they say, well, when they're talking publicly, they say, well, it's just numbers, it's cycles, it's mathematics, I don't believe in the signs, and blah 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 blah. But you know what, you kind of have to know what the signs mean. You need to know what the planets mean. You need to know what the angles mean. And for whatever reason, astrology works. Okay, it's very accurate, and for some people that's hard to accept. Is it as accurate as my trading model? No, it's not. My trading model's better. But the point is, I still pay attention here when we have major market declines, because even if we go back to like 1929 here, you will clearly see that the crash period happens when Mercury is slow, and when Mercury is making a station, we need to really look out for that period. You see it right here, right before the crash. So the parallels here are just endless in terms of what I can find with market crashes, going back to even when we had the flash crash, and all of these things. It basically always happens right around Mercury making a station. So the person that's just doing correlations to planets doesn't really understand what Mercury even means. And it's for what, like I said before, for whatever reason, astrology works very well, and the meanings of the planets work very well. Okay, so going back here to the 2010, you can see here right after the station here. And so the point is, every time there's a station, we have these crashes. So again, going back to Mercury, what does it mean? Well, Mercury is communications, it's motion. So when Mercury goes retrograde or it's getting slow, the communications break down and there's confusion. So what happens in a market crash? Well, there's confusion, right? There's no one in to buy the price, right? There's no one in to buy the stock when it starts dropping, right? So you have the bids start getting really spread out, and then you start having these huge chunks of price that get eaten up, right? on the way down. So that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't it happen in a Mercury retrograde? If the natural progress of the market is positive, right? Progress of mankind is positive. Retrograde period is going backward, right? This is a time where we're going backwards. So we would assume that the net progress of the market is forward, right? So it makes complete sense. I mean, that's not, I don't think it's um, even debatable at this point. I mean, I can show you time and time again when we have big crash problems. Mercury's involved, and it's making a station. Even in the 2011 summer crash, right? The one that I started out and that I forecasted. Um, if I put that up, that stationary point, where is that stationary? The stationary point would be right there. Okay, so even in that 2011 summer crash, there it is again. Mercury is going direct. So um, and when a planet changes direction, it's that's when we got to watch it. That's when it's making an angle to another planet. That's the important thing to watch, because it's gonna highlight that point. It's just like when it's changing direction, it's frozen, right? From our perspective, from our Newtonian perspective, it's frozen in the sky, and it's going to whatever it's contacting. Let's just say, I don't. That's not the right word. Whatever it's making an angle with on a harmonic, just like on an instrument would make a harmonic with the first fundamental, the second, the third, the fourth. All these standing waves that occur in open end pipes, one end closed, double ends, all these things, strings. That's more like what astrology is. So whatever Mercury is making a contact to at that point on that harmonic, we got to watch that. Okay. So that's just the first thing. So I just want to point that out. That we're near one of these points here, where Mercury is it's making a station. It's going to go retrograde. So I just wanted to point that out. Mercury is moving slowly already. Okay, so there's some confusion already happening. Things are slowing down. Okay, so I just want to point that out. That's coming up very soon. Okay, all right, that's the first point. Second point here is I wanted to start talking about major planetary orbits that would be either massively positive or massively negative. Now, this is not involving the inner planets. Okay, inner planets, I'm talking about the sun, the moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, whatever. And I call it, we call these points planets, even though we know the moon is not a planet. There's even points that I'm going to talk about that are not even, you can't even see them. Okay, these are trans-Neptunian points that were rectified and tracked in the 20s and the 30s by German astrologers. Okay, all right. So a lot of astrologers have a problem with tracking something that they can't see, right? Well, that's kind of stupid. Like, let me give you an example. We use the ascendant and the midheaven in astrology, right? Can you see it? No, you can't see it. It's not a planet, but we use it. We put it on the chart. Another stupid point here. The north node on the chart. We talk about that as a point of the positive direction you should be going in your life, the north node. The node is also contacts or people coming together. I mean, what is a node, right? It's where a bunch of things come together, right? And it's a very powerful point in a chart, right? It tells us the direction we're supposed to go in our life. It tells us the positive influences we have. It tells us when we're going to have connections with large groups of people. So what is that point? Is that a planet? No. It's where the path of the sun and the moon cross. It's an eclipse. It's where the eclipse. It was where they cross. It's not a planet. So in astrology, we see people over and over again using things that are not there, right? And they have orbits, but it works. Okay, so I'm focusing on what works. I really don't care, if someone tells me these are stars or these are planets that mean something. I'm going to investigate that. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to look for the evidence, and then I'm going to decide for myself. I will tell you, for the most part, the trans-Neptunian points that were discovered by the Germans are spectacular in terms of new information that you can get. All right. So what I was looking for was larger term events. Okay. So for example, I have these two negative ones down here, which is Pluto with Uranus making a hard angle, but not necessarily a 90 degree. I also included 45 degrees in here. So we got conjunction, we got a square, we got we've got a opposition, we've got a 45, and we got a 135. Okay, so these are all the hard angles. So Pluto and Uranus making that. In general, the market doesn't like this. Okay, doesn't like this. Another one in here is Saturn and Uranus. Market doesn't like this either. Same hard angles. Okay, so these are the bad guys. These are the bad influences down here. So when we start looking at markets and we see over time, for example, what happens when you have one of these bad guys here. Well, let's look at Pluto and Uranus here And again, I'm just looking at the hard angles. So what I did was I took this is one of the bad guys down here, and I put it up here on the market. And we're going to go back through time, and you can see that a lot of the times when these start occurring, the market doesn't like it. Now, you may look first here and say, well, the market went up during this period. Well, why did that happen? Well, because there's also good guys here that influence the market too. So, you know, when people look at astrology and they say, oh well, how could astrology be real because it says so many conflicting things. Well, that's kind of a stupid thing to say. That's like saying that there's no vectors in physics, that forces can't work against each other in physics. I mean, that's just stupidity. That's Newton's second law. The sum of the net forces equals sum of the forces equals the net force equals ma net. Okay, so stop being stupid. I mean, if you want to have a conversation about astrology, just stop approaching it like a 5-year-old would. Okay, this is science. This is vector mechanics. There's no difference. We're looking at the net sum of energies. Okay, and the other thing I will say too is that astrology does not explain everything. There's larger forces in astrology that we don't. How would we? This is just the beginning of what we're beginning to see in terms of the consciousness. Humans, the spectrum of human consciousness. There's so many other things out there we don't even know that are going on and affecting it. But we do know that it tends to have a pretty good effect on the markets, even if it's not a perfect science. So I always like to keep it. I always like to keep it mindful here. So this is Pluto Uranus. This is also a revolutionary aspect when it's making hard angles. The last time this happened right now, like it is now, was the Revolutionary War. So you can see back in here in this 2011 that when we had that crash into there, we had Pluto Uranus making that first orb. This was the first time we were being exposed to that energy in a long time. Okay, so on the first pass, the market usually reacts the worst, right? So let me just keep going down here, and I want to kind of show you this, that every time this is occurring, market does not like it. The last time we saw this was in 1987, and we had this bubble into here, and we had the 87 crash, right? So all things taken together, the market doesn't like this. Now, sometimes with a square, there's tension that can build up, and sometimes that tension it can lead to sometimes it can lead to like tension rallies. But again, the end result was not good here, right? And so going back further here, going back to the 60s here, okay, you can see here that when we had this market top into here in 65, Pluto Uranus, that was a top into there. In general, when you see these hard angles, the market doesn't like it. It's not a conducive environment. Or sometimes you just see like a sideways environment. So you might say, well, why did it go sideways here, but the other times it was a crash? Well, look at the good guys up here. We're going to talk about that in a minute. There's good energies. There's positive vectors there too, right? Positive vectors. Again, this is not even anything that complicated. I'm just looking at the positive and the negative influences and saying, what did the market do during these times? Well, we tend to go sideways or down. Okay, and these are just outer planets that are moving slowly, but they're moving slowly, right? And so their effect is felt for a long time. Look at this, same thing. You can go zoom in and you can see, but market doesn't like it. Okay, doesn't like it. I mean, we can say that as a general rule of thumb here. It does not like it, right? Look at this, 1900, right? So in general, not a positive thing, right? Okay. Well, let's take a look at one of the other influences here. Take a look at our next bad guy here, Saturn, Uranus. So if I zoom that in there, oops, wrong way, Saturn, Uranus, you can see that the effects of Saturn, Uranus after the 1987 crash were continued to be felt here too. So we have bad guy number one, bad guy number two. You see that they're both affecting the market. Now, why did I choose these planets? Well, they're just outer planets, right? They take a long time to come into an orb and to leave an orb, right? This isn't anything. I mean, this is nothing that crazy. Now, I know that for whatever reason, a lot of people have issues even looking into astrology for correlations. Part of it is that they don't even know what astrology is, right? Isn't that the definition of ignorance? You have an opinion about something, or you're trying to study something, you don't even know what it is. Like, why? So it's just kind of like, I I don't know. Like, to me, this astrology's always made sense to me, right? It makes complete sense. This is just an extension of science, right? But you take it, people that come in and, oh well, this is, how could this be? And the people that invented it, they were, barbaric times and whatnot. Well, guess what? It works. So, it's kind of the definition of ignorance to be arguing about something when you don't even know what it is, right? So, whatever. I mean, I'm just here. I'm showing you what I see. I'm showing you evidence. take from it what you want. So here's the other bad guy here, right? So we had Saturn, Uranus here. This was 2008. Had it in here too. Every time market didn't like that, did it? Sure did, right? This is the one where it tends to be, when Saturn's involved. Remember, hard angles are bad, but Pluto. Remember, when you don't have Saturn involved, that could be a tension that could lead to something good. But when Saturn's there, Saturn's like a dampener, right? Saturn's like, it's pretty rare that you're going to see, even here, you kind of got a sideways period. It's rare that you're going to see Saturn involved with a rally. I mean, Saturn is really there to basically tell you, what do you need to work on? Let's everything that you've built that's not strong, let's break it down. Let's make it stronger so we can go higher. So it's not that Saturn's, I'm calling this bad guy. It's not that Saturn's bad, right? It's just its responsibility. See the sideways period into here? Saturn's there. Saturn says, hey, let's break down what's not real and let's make it real. Let's make it solid. Like, have you ever seen when they try to put a piling in the ground for a dock, right? And there's muck, and they get these big machines, right? And they pound on the machine and the piling, and they pound on it, and they pound on it, and they pound on it, right? And it's going into the muck, right? And they're looking for a bottom, right? They're looking for something that's solid, right? And once it hits there, it doesn't move. It's solid, right? Well, that's what Saturn does, right? Saturn comes in and says, we're going to find something that's solid. And again, Uranus is also in there, which is sudden, unexpected. And Uranus, so Saturn is also establishment. Uranus is anti-establishment. But the point is, when these two get together, market doesn't like it. You can see here. You see this spirit into here? It doesn't like it. Okay, so again, this is the bad guy, the Pluto Uranus, and this is the bad guy, Saturn Uranus. So again, time and time again, when we go back and see these influences, I mean, it's there. It's there. The market doesn't like these, right? And so the amazing thing is that not only do these hard angles, give the market issues, but the market behaves exactly as it should according to the meaning of the planets. That's the other thing that's amazing. It's like, not only do the angles work, but also the meaning plays out as to how it's supposed to play, right? Look at this period into here, Saturn Uranus, flat, flat. Market don't like this guy, right? But what happened? What do you have to do? Well, to get stronger, right? Look at this one in here, 2008. To get stronger, right, you have to break down, right? 2008. So I talked about Saturn and Uranus being establishment and then anti-establishment. Okay, so what happened in 2008? Well, in the exact day of the opposition, right? Obama was elected president, right? So he represented something unusual, something new, being the first black president, right? Is into the establishment. So the establishment was shaken up by Uranus, right? So that's that was kind of interesting. That happened on the day of the election, but the markets didn't like it, right? Didn't like it. So you know, Saturn is a time of contraction, and people that have, in general, have very responsible lives or try to be responsible people, when the Saturn transits come, that it's not as shocking. But when you're being flamboyant, careless, and just kind of throwing caution to the wind, that's when Saturn comes in and really hammers down. Okay, so those are the bad guys. So you can see that, right? All right, so let's go up to some of the good guys here. First one is going to be Jupiter and Apollon. Okay, Jupiter is a planet of expansion. Apollon is a trans-Neptunian point that represents a combination of Jupiter and Gemini. These 2 points are wild expansion. These are wildly positive points in anyone's chart. If you have Jupiter and Apollon in a chart, it's a big money point. Okay, that's just a really positive place in the chart. So typically you see in the market, when we have these Jupiter points, the market tends to like it, right? Even if it's a small period of time. Now the problem is Jupiter moves really fast, right? It moves a lot faster than these other planets, Saturn and Uranus. I mean, these are these are the further beyond Jupiter. So I put 3 Jupiter influences in here that I thought would be important, just because it's so fast, right? So I said, well, okay, we got 2 of these for every 3 of these, just because of that, right? But look at right here, Jupiter and Apollon. Look at that, right in that 2009 rally, positive. Look at there, right near the top. It can happen that we would have a decline, like right here, during a positive period. But what was also happening down here? We had the bad boy here, right? Or the bad guy here. That was also in there. So when we think about this, we got to look at vectors, right? We got to look at the net sum. But in general, Jupiter and Apollon is a positive point, even if it's going to mark a bottom or whatever it's going to mark. I mean, we go back into, let me zoom in here through history. Um, in general, it's a positive period. If you look back into here, 98, Jupiter and Apollon together, very, very positive point. Okay, and I'm looking at the positive angles here now, right? Conjunctions, sextiles, trines, semisextiles, and the 150s, which is inconjunct. These are generally the positive harmonics. Again, harmonic is like you would see with an instrument. It's a tuning fork. It's going to vibrate at that same harmonic all the time. Some of them make what we say positive angles in astrology, some of them not. Look at this. Every single time you see that Jupiter wants to go up, right? Jupiter, Apollon, Jupiter, Apollon. Really good stuff here, right? Really good stuff. I mean, look at this. I mean, just, you can have some declines in here, but look, there's, it's not always 100%, but you can see that for the most part, Jupiter is a good thing for the markets. Going back through time, you can have your periods into here where it's not going to give you, your 100% here, but for the most part, Jupiter it's a very expansive energy, and with Apollon, it also is. Let's go back to 1987 here for a second. I'm going to talk about a couple more here in a minute that were positive, and we'll talk about the 1987 crash here because that was kind of an important thing. But then, getting back to the Jupiter Apollon here, this is just a positive point that I picked. Market tends to like it. Okay. Next point that I have here is Jupiter Kronos. Jupiter Kronos. Kronos represents the highest authority or figure. It's the president. It's also the top of the mountain. So Jupiter with Kronos it's market tops. It's also positive expansionary points. So you can see here, this is interesting. Right after the 1987 crash, there was all of this positive energy that came in. Okay, positive energy was there, kind of all around it, right? So right when it crashed, did it keep going down? No, we had a bounce into there, right? But we also had some very heavy energy in there too. The negative was there too. So we had a negative context, but then the Federal Reserve came in and said, Alan Greenspan says, you are backed by the full faith and credit of the Federal Reserve. And this was, to me, this is the function of the central bank, just to stop these crash periods into here, and not do what it's doing now, which is just inflate, but it's to stop these crash periods into here. So anyway, getting back into the Jupiter Kronos period. And then, again, another just expansionary point. I mean, this is looking at these points here, we see that Jupiter Kronos is going to tend to occur, generally be positive effects. I mean, even if it's small, sometimes it can lead to like little rallies into here. And again, we're looking at a multitude of aspects here. And again, when they start overlapping each other, you can get some negative points into there. But in general, we see positive things. Jupiter, it could be like the rallies sinking, but it stops it from going down too much, or it could be a bottom, or in this case into here. Look at what happened here with Jupiter and Kronos. It was a rally. It was a rally into here. Generally, they're positive energies, right? Positive stuff. Okay. And I say positive for the masses. When we're talking about the masses, we're talking about a mob of people, right? A mob of people trading, right? We're talking about lowest common denominator, right? If you take a person who's diligent in the way they're living their life and conscientious, these tighter angles, may not have that much of an effect, may actually have a positive effect, right? The harder angles. But when we're talking about lowest common denominator, usually, these harmonics into here, the second and the fourth and the eighth harmonics are negative, and these are typically positive. The third and the sixth harmonics, the 12th harmonic. Okay, so continuing here with our Jupiter theme, our positive theme. Now, going up one more. Now I want to talk about this one. This is a really powerful one. This is Jupiter with Uranus. And this is really important because this was really in effect with the mania of the quantitative easing. This one you can clearly see every time Jupiter comes in with Uranus, it's positive. Look at this in the 2011 to here. And notice we are just ending a positive Jupiter Uranus, and we are just ending a Jupiter Kronos. Okay, so the market is now hitting a top in terms of both of these positive guys, right? And so that's kind of interesting because that in and of itself, the absence of the positive can be in effect. Look at this into here into 2010. Look at how now we had positives and negatives in here. You see the negatives down here with positives, so we had like a sideways period. Once these negatives got out of the way and you just had more of the positives, we had a rally, right? Take a look at 2009. This is really interesting here. So if I'm looking at this now, in terms of, let's see, we're at Jupiter Uranus here. You see how it was present here at one of these harmonics during that rally, okay? And then Jupiter Kronos was coming into here. Notice when the market was thinking this was a positive Jupiter Kronos, it's just kind of went sideways before it went back down for the bottom. Because if we take a look here, right after that positive phase here, the Jupiter Kronos, Saturn Uranus came back in, okay? And sorry, Saturn Uranus was here, and that came back in for one more drop. Look what happened when Saturn Uranus moved out of orb, bottom. So that's the negative, okay? Here's some positives, here's a positive, here's a positive. So the next question is, well, looking at all these, can we put all the pieces together? And the answer is, yeah, we can. I'm going to show you in a minute. I've made an oscillator from these. I just subtracted the values, but I just want to show you more of this Jupiter Uranus. I think this is probably one of the most positive aspects I've seen on all the charts. Look at that. That's positive in there. When you go back on this, I mean, this is like, because the market in of itself is, it's kind of both of those things. Here's a period where it went down. See, you do the trick there. But the market is kind of a combination of, here's a bottom. It actually marked the bottom point into here. The market's a combination of Jupiter and Uranus. Jupiter is money, it's expansion, and Uranus is unexpected wild swings. What's the market? Wild swings of people speculating and on large amounts of money. So Jupiter, Uranus, I think for the market is just really positive stuff. Let me go back here to some of our crash periods. Let's go to 87. So in here, look at this. So we had Jupiter, Uranus. And this one, I think this was actually a trine. So this was a period here where we had some negatives with the positives, right? So what happened? Well, we had the negative, but again, I think this was the Federal Reserve coming in saying, we are backing you. We are, we are supporting you, stopping that crash, right? Look at a period where Jupiter, Uranus went down. Well, we had a negative period into here too. You see that? You see the Saturn, Uranus into there? So when they're working kind of against each other, that's interesting, right? What we kind of would want to look for, if we were looking for like Jupiter, Uranus, we would just kind of look for it when is it acting alone? What are some periods where it's acting, just by itself, without a lot of those negative influences? And a lot of times when you see that, you just see expansion, right? If there's nothing here to block it, I mean, there's none of these negatives in here, you just see expansion. Even if it's on the downside, it's going to be a mild drop. Just expansion, expansion, expansion. I mean, Jupiter, Uranus, right? Notice when the drops come here, there's no negatives into here, right? There's negatives here, right? This is the 29 crash. Well, sometimes just the absence of a positive, right, can cause it to go down if you have hyper speculation. So you don't even necessarily need a transit, right? If you're in an airplane and you're flying high, and your engine just cuts out, right, you're going to fall, right? Even if there's not something pushing you down, right? So, Jupiter Uranus is in general is a positive energy, and it's a wild speculatory energy, right? And look at this period into here before this crash in the 40s, right? You had 3 Jupiter points here kind of coming together, and then when they went away, we had a fall off there. And so, I mean, the comparisons here, this just goes on and on and on. I mean, it just goes, I mean, it's just amazing to see these energies in play over and over again. So that's kind of what I'm looking at here. And I looked at, again, where we are now. Well, what I did was I made an oscillator from these. And again, I mean, this is just really basic stuff I'm doing here. I'm not doing anything that crazy, just looking at positive forces, negative forces, looking and adding them up, looking where the turning points happen with Mercury. I mean, I don't think this is anything, crazy, like, out of the ordinary, at least to me, because this is the logical way to assimilate, properties of energy, from a binary perspective. Everything is a 0 and a 1, and you build up, right? I mean, it's not that crazy, but for some reason, a lot of researchers can't even get past a cycle of the moon, or oh, let's look at the lunar cycle or the full moon and the new moon. We're just gonna talk about that forever. Well, a big deal. I mean, that's not. I mean, if you're trying to pinpoint things, on a shorter term, that's fine. But for me, when I'm trying to pinpoint on the shorter term, I'm just using my trading system, more than this. And people get really anxious, when you tell them, you trade with planets, they get very nervous. They get, oh, wait, really? I mean, you believe in that stuff, and isn't that like voodoo? And it's just like, what are you gonna tell them? I mean, like, no, it's not. I can show you, and they don't even they don't even, you could show them and they still won't believe you. They'll just say, oh yeah, oh it's you believe, do you read your horoscope? And they get all into the stuff, and it's just like, okay, whatever. I mean, I don't know what to say other than you're not at that level of consciousness. I mean, it's not, is it even level of consciousness? No, you just look at the charts, you see what you're looking at. I don't think it's anything that crazy. I don't understand why people can't see it, but whatever. I mean, you can prove this mathematically through correlations, whatever. But there are times, I will say too, when astrology doesn't get it right, like with the Federal Reserve when the quantitative easing. I mean, we know that the Federal Reserve has floated this market in the face of extremely negative transits. So, it's possible to defy. Like I said, astrology does not create everything. But in the absence of the Federal Reserve, and it's just the natural market forces, the markets are going to be affected by this. Okay. All right, so I made this oscillator, and I just added the positives and subtracted the negatives. I mean, this is nothing that crazy. But I got an oscillator here, so I'm going to go over here so we can just see that oscillator. So we can just see when is it positive, when is it negative, and how did the market react to that? Well, we can see here that we're right at the top of an extremely positive period into here, right? I mean, this is like, look at this. This is all the Jupiter energy, okay? Minus all of the bad energy, right? So we've had a really big Jupiter point into here, and we're right at the top right now, right? We're right at the top of that. So I would think that we are definitely due for a large scale drop into here, and this looks like it go into May based off of this. Now, I post all kinds of signal or things on the website, right? I post lunar cycles and the Bradley and all this stuff. And the Bradley's there, and the Bradley basically goes up because the Bradley is based on declination in addition to transits. It's not just based on the angles that they make and whatever. But to me, I didn't write the Bradley. Donald Bradley wrote this thing back in the 20s and the 30s, and I post it because people watch it. And sometimes on the Bradley they say, look at the turning points. Don't just look at how it rises and falls. Look at the turning points. It's like, okay, fine. It's there. I look at it, whatever. But to me, this makes more sense what I'm showing you, because I'm basically showing you, going back here, I'm basically showing you the major negative players and the major positive players. So then from that, I'm making a composite here. And this is what I'm getting. Now, those of you who know me and have followed me through the years know that I always look at things from a blank slate, okay? And that's how you come up with new ideas. I studied martial arts for years. I did, and I ran for years and did track and field and all that. But I did martial arts. I studied martial arts. I studied Bruce Lee's art, Jeet Kune Do, which was the way of the intercepting fist. And the whole point of that is to focus on simplicity, to clear your mind, to focus on what works, to focus on the present moment, to not be stuck in a regimented way of looking at things. So when I look at things, I come with a blank slate and I just start building from what I see. And so I may have, one time I may have, a transit chart, and I may have a Fibonacci chart. One time I might have what I just built here and I'm showing you here, right? Because if you want to understand, you always have to look at things from a beginner's standpoint, from the mindset of a beginner. That's how you get better. And you don't want to always just look at things in the same way. You want that, and that's the whole point of creativity and really understanding, because the markets have completely changed their character and dynamic since the quantitative easing began. And I've seen some of the best forecasters in terms of long-term cycles, astrology, whatever, and just be wrong over and over and over again. Some of them have gotten things pretty good, but the reason that they've gotten it wrong is because the market is changing what it's doing, and if you're not paying attention to that, you're going to be dead in the water. And so that's one of the reasons why I basically went back with my mathematical model and in just basically I'm trying to perfect that, and it's really been doing well. And I just kind of follow that because if the Fed's going to influence something, my model's going to pick it up. Okay, but that's not to completely discount astrology, because I think right now we're at a turning point worthwhile looking at, right? You can see into here that we had some negative oscillations into here, and the market continued to go up into here, right? You see this into here? The market went up in the absence of these Jupiters, right? So, um, it's like, again, it's not 100%. We have the Fed messing around in there. I mean, Fed's messing around. What can you do? But when you got the Fed and positive transits, look what you get. You get these rallies, right? Amazing, right? Just the difference here between the Jupiter and the Jupiter and the Saturn and Uranus transits into here, right? Just really amazing stuff. Going back here into 2011, it's still pretty amazing, remarkable that you can see into here that once it just continued to have these positive Jupiter effects into here in those rally times too, or the net positive, let's just say the net positive. Right? 2009, look at this. Look at that. Went down for a little bit more, but right there, that's when that negative Saturn-Uranus aspect ended, and got that pop up. Look at this part. Look at the rally in 2008 that just came off the difference of that energy, and then it continued to go down. So again, it's always in the context of what's happening. What's happening? Are we crashing? Well, then it's just going to be a little bear market rally. Are we rallying? It's going to be an irrational exuberance thing. That's the whole point here. I mean, time and time again, you go back and look at these. It's just amazing. I mean, to me it is. I mean, it's, again, not always perfect, but yes. Let's go back to the crashes. Let's go back to 87. Kind of see here that we were basically more or less in a negative period into here when that crash occurred, right? That was kind of a weird period again, because again we had a mix in the crash. We had a mix of some Jupiter stuff with this negative stuff into here, but you know, interesting stuff to say the least. I mean, we can look at these oscillators, and it's not a bad way to look at it. Just to kind of say, okay, this can give us some clues into terms of, are we going to be more positive or more negative going forward? Um, okay. Anyway, you can just see in the 40s there's some really nice correlations here, bottoms, tops. You know, nothing's a perfect science here, but it's pretty good. I mean, I think that it's. Let me put it this way: we should be mindful of these events when they unfold, because we're able to get some insights, I think, into the markets here. Going back into 2011 again. So going through all of this is just kind of what I wanted to share with you today. Where are we right now? Well, where we are right now is we are at the top, a major top right here, okay? And it drops off all the way through May, right? And if we look at the aspects coming up, if I start zooming out here from the Dow, okay, we've got a lot more negative coming up than positive. We've got Pluto-Uranus squares coming up here. And this whole period, it's just amazing how long this is lasting for. This is going through 2016, right? So we've got a little bit of Jupiter here in the middle of this year, this is like in June, right? So in June we got that Jupiter, and that's why you see this rise here in the oscillator up here. But then we get back into this negative period. So we're basically in a negative period based on this model until July 15th of 2014, or no, it started somewhere in there, July of 2014, somewhere in there. So, and then we get our final, I guess, our peak negative somewhere out into, further out here. March of 2014 is our peak negative point into there. So I think, based off of this, we got to be real careful going forward with the market. I think, anytime you have Uranus in the picture too, you have sudden unexpected moves. And so we have these Pluto-Uranus squares, and the positive Jupiter effects are really falling off. Look at how much we had into here: positive Jupiter-Uranus, Jupiter-Kronos, Jupiter-Apollon. We had a lot of positive Jupiter stuff in here. It's going away. for a few years. So just something to be mindful on. I just wanted to share that with you just to give you some insights, because I know a lot of you are really into the astrology, and I am too. I mean, I love astrology. I look at it. I don't check my transits every 30 seconds, but if there's something in my life or an event or something's going on and I want to understand, I will look at my charts and I will, try to understand what energy is in play. Too, because one of the concepts of life is to be living in the present moment and not be worried about things that are coming, beyond our control. We can only control what we have in the present moment. But sometimes we can gain insights through astrology. And right now, what I'm telling you is there on balance, there's more negative energy coming in the next few years than positive. Um, there are cycles that point to positive things. Like the K wave or the Kondratiev cycle shows a double cycle up. And and the Bradley, after June, it goes up. Sorry, it goes up through June this year. And I mean, there are some hit or miss things going on, but really, if I'm going to present something to you in terms of what is pure negative energy for the market, what is pure positive energy for the market, this is really what it is. What I'm showing you here. So it's just something that I came up with. And I'll come up with all kinds of models all the time. But to me, this just makes sense. It's logical. It's huge blocks of energy that last for long periods of time, and you can see right now that we are at the top of one of those blocks, those positive blocks, the net composite here. If we took them as like a vector and we subtracted at them, we're at a major peak right now in terms of that. So looking at my trading system, some of you may be pulling your hair out saying, well, if the trading system goes long, why would you go long if we're at a top here? And the answer is, if the trading system goes long, I go long because that's what it says to do, and that's what I follow. Okay, and that's basically where I am with my trading right now. I'm just following that system. Fortunately, the last few days it stayed short, and right now, as I'm talking, it's still short. And we'll see what happens, over the weekend. But look, one has nothing to do with the other. My trading system is, again, just purely mathematically based off of price action. Some people are more comfortable with that, and that's fine. But I don't really care what I use, astrology or mathematics. It's just as long as it works. That's all I care about. And to me, right now, the mathematical models are working better, much better, just because it will pick up things that outside exogenous variables like the Federal Reserve or things like that occur. But again, be mindful of this, okay? Be mindful of this, because I think this is a very real influence, and I think that most likely we're at some type of a major top right now in the markets. Whew. All right, that was a long video, but I just wanted to put it out there to you, just to share that information with you. Again, this is, for those of you interested, this is Market Trader Gold Air software. Software is about $2,000, I think, to buy something in that price range. It's well worth the investment. To me, this software, there's nothing like it out there. So if you're looking for a good astrology software, it's worth the investment. To me, this is worth $10,000 or $20,000 just with what it can do. It's just a fantastic software. All right, now that I'm done with that plug, I'll let you go here. I'm Shane Smillian. I'm the founder of Wolf Trader, and don't forget to trade with the wolf. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.